Hey Rebels, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to go over how to keep it simple. We're going to go over a few basic principles in how to keep our trading simple so that we have a higher chance of success. So, three of these basic principles that I want to think about as we're walking through the charts is risk to reward and volatility and the sentiment. If we can combine these three things and find favorable environment with all these three things, we're going to have a higher chance of success in the future. So we're just going to dive right in. We're just going to walk through some charts, some of my trades, some just random charts here, and go through some of these basic principles as well as a few basic charting patterns as well. And I can go more into patterns in other videos if that sounds interesting. The other thing I want to mention in this video is the $1,000 giveaway. I would like to give $1,000 to my community. So what I'm looking for is engagement, leaving comments, join the Telegram group, join the chat. What I'd like to see is I kind of just want to build the engagement for my videos. I know I'm a new channel. I think that I have a lot to offer, but I'd like to just kind of ramp up the engagement a little bit. And so I'm doing $1,000 giveaway for anybody who I find is being the most engaged on the channel, whether that be liking the videos or commenting on the videos or engaging in the Telegram group, asking questions, asking for particular video content, anything like that. By the end of this trading campaign, I'd like to give away $1,000. So that's my goal. So anyway, with that being said, why don't we just dive right into some basic patterns and basic principles? I'm going to start out with Doge. And let's start out with the sentiment because sentiment is a pretty important key player. The last time I got into Doge was last cycle, probably somewhere around here. Got in, made a little bit of money, cashed out, feeling pretty good, FOMO'd back in, and then I gave it all away. So sentiment is number one. When you are hearing about a coin a lot and the charts are looking something like this, not a favorable time to be entering at all. And what you want to do is you want to wait for things to kind of cool down a little bit, and in fact, the volatility to decrease. So what I have right here is the average true range. That's the indicator that I have on the bottom. That's just an indicator that you can type in the indicators, and it's going to give you that. And what we're looking for is you can see that when I entered the market somewhere around here, the volatility was very high. Not a good time to be entering the market. What I wanted to do was wait for things to cool down, wait for this is a weekly downtrend, wait for those weekly downtrends to break. You can see that the volatility had decreased significantly. We went through like a long sideways accumulation, and you can see that the low volatility points are typically when you want to get interested. We have low volatility, we have an uptick in the volatility as we have price increase. That was a much better time to be interested in the market. Zooming in again for the next period, volatility was higher during this period, not necessarily the time to be getting into the market or being interested, but we have this weekly downtrend. I do this on the weekly time frame. I know I'm on the daily, but I typically use the daily average true range, which is just measuring how much the bars wiggle to give me an idea what the volatility is. So we're on the daily time frame, but I typically draw these weekly trends on the downtrends on the weekly. So, we breach this downtrend right here. We have this cup forming, which is basically just a rounded base. You can see that the selling slows down, it gets less steep, and then the buying steps in. So just putting like a kind of a general rounded base that happens quite often. A breach of the downtrend and a rounded base already puts you into a higher probability of success. And then we can see we're also in a low volatility environment. That was pretty much like the go signal right here before we took off. So same kind of thing happening again. Weekly downtrend. We've broken the weekly downtrend. We're in a lower volatility environment than earlier. Typically, the volatility increases as the cycle goes on. So you can see the volatility is kind of consolidating at these higher levels, but still lower than the highs. So that's something that we want to keep in mind. And then the risk to reward is also the other thing that we want to keep in mind here. That's the last of it. And really what I mean by that is if we have a breach of this downtrend, we come back down for a retest. Let's say we buy on a retest of this cup. We have risk to the downside. I'm going to put it right here on this retest of this trend and coming back up. Here you can see that I have a 3-to-1 risk to reward. So for every dollar that I'm risking, I'll get 3 in return. Okay, so the risk to reward is good. The volatility is a little bit more favorable than it was, and we also have a little bit higher confirmation where we can see that the selling has objectively slowed down. It's not subjective. This is objectively has slowed down, and we've started to see higher highs and higher lows. And not a lot of people are really talking about Doge right now. That's typically what happens. I mean, it's not that you can find Doge content all day, but what I'm saying is that it's not like in your face, right? Like Hyperliquid was something that was in your face um, for the last several weeks. And if I just go to a Hyperliquid chart, I guess I'll just go to this chart. My chart's a little bit messy, but we're just going to go to that chart anyhow. And you can see very, very exciting volatility, you know, definitely not the high or not definitely not at the lows of the volatility when you would want to be interested. Like I said, just ignore the mess on this chart. And you can see that Hyperliquid ever since has basically just been in an absolute free fall, even though it was basically being very hyped up at the time. So the sentiment for hype was pretty much at an all-time high, right around the highs. Okay. So not a good time to be getting into Hyperliquid. And you can see why that is because you have a lot more risk to the downside. Have a lot of um, you don't have a lot of ways to gauge the potential upside. I know this chart is very messy, but just I will go into how to project. These are actually price projections, potential projections, and I will go into that in other video. I actually have videos on this, but I'd like to go through this in more detail. But the basic premise here is that the volatility was much higher here than the lows, and it had been going up for a long time. And the longer this thing goes up, the more chances it has to go to the downside. And we actually met resistance here at my projection, which pretty much nailed it to perfection. And now we're coming back down to, find support somewhere down in here. So why don't we just kind of keep walking through a couple of the trades that I've been getting into and some of the reasons why. I have a tendency, and you have to also know yourself. I have a tendency myself to get into trades a little bit earlier than is necessary because I like to be in the market. We've been talking about potential downside in this market for quite some time. We've been following that on the channel, waiting for consolidation or waiting for a correction. We've been talking about that in the weekly analysis. And how is that going to affect alts? Well, probably not very well. But at the same time, I like to get in a little bit early. I see a descending wedge pattern here playing out. I was able to get kind of some lower prices here, and the volatility is also low. So if you wanted to, what you could do is I'm going to put this on the weekly. You can see the volatility is low on the daily, and I'll pop this on a weekly time frame really quick. And what you can do is you can just draw yourself a trend line and set an alert. And all you do is you draw a trend line, click on that, set an alert. I usually try like to do only once, so it's not dinging at me constantly. And then click the expiration and just click it as far ahead as you can, and then save that. And now it's going to ding me when the price gets above this level. And so by waiting for it to breach this level, you're just giving yourself a higher chance that this is going to go in your favor. And I'll show you actually an example of that. Another one that I got into a little too early that I'm most likely going to get stopped out on is Sonic, because at the time we were looking like we were getting risk to reward was looking pretty good. And we also had this wedge formation, but we had also had weeks before we had actually breached this downtrend right here. So we breached that downtrend, retested, and seemed to be going sideways. And then obviously this market environment is not necessarily conducive to further upside. And so I had my stops at the lows, actually a little bit lower than the lows. I haven't got stopped out of this trade yet, but if it ticks any lower, then I'll get stopped out, which is okay because my risk was much lower. I had a lot of like very little risk to the downside. I knew where it was going to invalidate me. And sometimes what the market will do is it'll actually tick you out and then it'll go in the opposite direction, just the way you thought it was going to. And that's part of the game. And you have to be prepared for that possibility as well. So again, risk to reward, good. Volatility. Why don't we look at the volatility quick on the daily time frame and the sentiment too. Nobody's really talking about Sonic. I definitely heard a lot more about Sonic, in months previous, but nobody's really talking about it now. So again, volatility is decreasing. Now, what we have here is very interesting because we have an uptick in the volatility as prices going down. So it's high likelihood that this is going to get stopped out, and then we're actually going to see further downside. That is quite possible. We could also see a double bottom. Nobody knows. That's basically the point. So you have to kind of just compile these things for yourself and understand that nobody knows what's going to happen on the right-hand side of the chart. But if you understand these principles, it's just going to help you out a lot. So again, higher probability of being wrong. What you could do too now is, now that this has played out so far, you can actually set an alert on this trend line and just wait. And that's kind of the beauty of it because you can go through many charts, anything that you've ever heard of before, and just go through the charts and just set an alert on that upper trend line and walk away. You don't have to care at all about this until it dings at you, you know. So why don't we just go through a couple random charts that I have in my watch list, and then we can discuss, how you might go about, like if you hear about a token, let's say you heard about Injective. I don't know anything about Injective necessarily. I really don't. Honestly, like I've seen a lot of influencers talk about it, especially up here. Everybody was very excited about it. It was an early runner this cycle, and it may have peaked already. Who knows? But we had massive, yeah, like a 42x already this cycle. And people are just waiting for this thing to carry on and be a big winner. So who knows? I don't know. But what we can do is we can use a few basic tools to give us an idea of strength and weakness in this token, and then combine the sentiment and maybe the volatility as well. So the whole point of this is just keep it simple. There's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of ways that you can mess this up by trying to overcomplicate things. And so again, on the weekly time frame, I drew a trend line, and I already have my alert on here, already set, and it's just waiting for price to breach this trend line. That'll be the first sign of strength for me. The other thing I actually have is a trend line from way back here. I just put this on the lows. I actually had this trend line a long time ago before we even broke down below. And once we broke down below, I was like, okay, it's probably going to spend a lot longer time beneath these levels before we see any upside. Now, you could have caught the exact low, and if you did, congratulations. I don't think it's worth selling or anything like that right now. But yeah, and the other thing that we have here is a support and resistance. I actually am going to pop this on the weekly just to kind of clean this up a little bit. But this yellow line, pretty significant support and resistance. So overall, once the price action gets above all of these levels, we're going to be in a much stronger position. So even if we waited for that to happen, even if we bought exactly when we ticked above, even if we did that next week and we bought again, even if we wanted our stop loss way down here, risk to reward is looking pretty decent. We still have 182, which is 200% to the ups. I mean, yeah, it's almost a 3x. It's very close to a 3x. And getting a 3x on your capital in a matter of months is unheard of because you can't do that in the stock market in years and years and years. Okay. So a lot of people get really greedy and they try to everybody wants their 10x, and it's like, well, if you get like three x's, well, there's a 9x, or and it's and then you could 2x that, and then now all of a sudden you're getting closer to that 20x. Okay, so I think being more realistic, and if you entered this trade, you might take 70% of your profits and just rotate it into something else that's a little bit lower. Risk to reward is better. That's just something to keep in mind. You kind of the beauty of this is that you get to go and make your own strategy based on these simple principles. And when you learn how to analyze these charts for yourself, you get to do it yourself. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to anybody else. You can just go in and do it for yourself. Clearpool, this is something that Alex Becker has talked about quite a bit on his channel. And so why don't we just kind of do the same thing that we would do. Let me delete some of this, clean this up. Clearpool is a real world asset token. And why don't we just do the basics? The first thing I'm going to start off with is a weekly downtrend. Okay, well, we broke that weekly downtrend. All right, great. So we're kind of in accumulation. Not necessarily, we are seeing higher lows, which is nice, but I would probably simplify this and just put a rectangle here. We're basically just range trading. Okay, and so you can see the price action has breached this a few times. We haven't really been able to close above this top. So once that happens, once we have a close above this level, consecutive is better. I'd like to see 3 or more. But once we have actual closes above that level, which is pretty significant because it's just held the price action down for many months. Once we have that happen, okay, well then we can do the same thing. What's the risk to reward? Okay, even if we bought up here, okay, risk to the downside. And you don't even have to worry about percentage terms. It's just what's the risk to reward? You're risking, here's basically, yeah, 3.5. You're risking a dollar to make $3.5. That's what you want to see. You have broken the downtrend here already, so that's good. Basically just waiting for this accumulation to break potentially. And again, I mean, shoot, maybe we have an absolute crazy bull market. We get way up here and you get yourself a 12x. Is that likely? I don't know. I'm not here to tell you that, but we will go over ways to find projections and different levels that we could reach. And then also having a sell strategy is very great. But in this video, we're going to talk about buying, basically. What's another one? Nosana. This is just in my, I haven't looked at these in a long time. So I'm just kind of going through, we're just trying to apply those same basic principles to the charts. Nosana had a lot of hype quite a while ago, and you can see just hasn't quite been able to breach this downtrend. And then we have a support and resistance here that seems pretty significant. This purple box here is a buy zone that I marked out, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, but same kind of thing. And I actually might do that right now. I'll actually just set an alert on this right now. Is this something that I've heard of, been interested in, maybe did a little research on it? It's a like an AI project on Solana or something like that. And you can go in and do, I would suggest you go and do your research on these things, but effectively, it doesn't really matter what the fundamentals are right now because crypto is a speculative market and fundamentals don't necessarily matter in a speculative market. It's all up to your imagination. So the charts will tell us if it is able to capture that imagination. The charts were telling us back here that it has the potential to capture the imagination, And so whether this thing just dies off completely and never recovers, who knows? But once we do breach these levels and maybe, get some consecutive closes, weekly closes above this level, and you don't necessarily need to wait for consecutive weekly closes because it may have taken off by then. But if you don't see that, there's your signal that maybe it's not as strong as you had hoped. Okay. We'll put that there. Risk to reward. There's your risk. Reward to the upside. This is where you're getting kind of even more degenerate. This is like the smaller the token, the higher the volatility, the higher potential returns. And so keeping your risk to reward, managing your risk is the best thing you can do because this token may be like 10 times more risky, 50 times more risky than Bitcoin. But if you manage your risk and you understand that it's more risky, well, then maybe you're not going to bet the farm on it, and maybe you'll bet a little bit less on this, but you're also going to get 560%, which is over a 6x. It's almost a 7x just to the all-time highs, right? So anyway, I could go over this list for days and days and hours. So anything that you've ever heard of, keep it simple. Think of the volatility. Why don't we just for fun, let's just end it with Nosana. It's something that has been able to capture the imagination before. I've heard it talked about a lot, and so it has that potential. I'm not here. Who knows? One good thing is we did see an increase in volatility as the price increased. That's one of the first signs that there's potential here. When the market woke up, Nosana woke up in a pretty big way. And again, you can kind of draw these accumulation zones here. I'll delete that buy zone. Breached the buy zone. It actually, it's breaking this trend line and above the support is going to be even higher confirmation because you could probably draw this accumulation something like this on a shorter term, kind of broke that accumulation down for a retest, potentially higher. So it's just, these are things to consider, right? And now nobody's talking about Nosana. I heard a lot of people talking about Nosana here and here and here, and every single one of those rallies, everybody was very excited about Nosana. It's a Solana beta. And so theoretically, if Solana goes up, then Nosana is going to go up even more. That's the idea. What are the charts saying? You have to go in and decide for yourself. So anyway, I know this was kind of long-winded. Hopefully this was helpful. Just a few basic principles to think about. Risk, what's your risk to reward? What's the sentiment like? And what's your volatility like? You want to enter on low volatility when the risk reward is more favorable, and in general, when nobody's talking about it. Because when everybody's talking about it, we're here, or we're here, or we're here. And so if you have to ask the question, is it too late? It's probably too late. If you look at a chart like this, is it too late? Well, I think it's pretty clear to say, no, it's not too late. You might even be too early. So you just got to weigh these things out for yourself. So anyway, if I haven't gone over the Telegram group, links in the description below. Please join in and leave a message for me in the general chat. I always love starting a conversation. Shoot me a comment down below what you like and don't like about these videos, what's going to be helpful to you, any particular altcoins that you want me to go over as far as anything that you're interested in. What am I seeing in the charts and what kind of analysis can I do to help you stay on the right side of the trends and maybe find good entries and possible exits as well. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I like to do. And I like to grow my channel. If I haven't mentioned it before in this video, $1,000 giveaway to the most engaged person that I see on my channel. If you're in the Telegram group and you're in the videos commenting down below, you're going to get $1,000 from anywhere from here to the end of the year. I'm going to be doing a giveaway. whenever I feel like it, whenever I see some profits in the trading account, as we keep going through this, the very final stages of this bull market. So anyway, thank you guys for hanging in there. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.